This is WFYI News Now. It's January 30th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a bill moving through the State House that would fully legalize online gambling and online lottery. Indiana lawmakers are closer than ever to declassifying fentanyl test strips as paraphernalia. And a new report suggests a strong link between alcohol and cancer that shows even moderate drinking may put you at risk.
For me personally, it was a revelation about the strength of the data. I had no idea how strong it was before I looked at it.
Those stories coming up, but first. Nonprofit Exodus Refugee Immigration announced Tuesday evening that it will be locking its doors to its building in Indianapolis and moving appointments to virtual or off-site locations. In a Facebook post, the organization said the decision came in response to Governor Mike Braun's executive order signed earlier that day. The order states that all state and federal law enforcement agencies must continue to comply with what the Trump administration asks them to do, involving the deportation of undocumented citizens. Exodus said in a social media post that the executive order, quote, perpetuates the baseless idea that most immigrants are criminals, even though numerous studies show that immigrants actually commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans, end quote. Exodus works to bring refugees and asylees to Indiana. Indiana would fully legalize online gambling and online lottery under legislation approved by a House committee Tuesday. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports, the state's casinos are split on whether to support the online gaming expansion.
The bill would allow Indiana's existing casinos and racinos to offer casino-style games online and on mobile devices. Casino Association of Indiana President Matt Bell says online gaming is important to the industry's ability to grow its market.
This is about an opportunity to meet players that we wouldn't normally meet within the walls of our casinos.
But Oliver Berry, who represents Terre Haute casino owner Churchill Downs, says online gaming will cannibalize brick-and-mortar casinos that support local workers and businesses.
Instead, it will primarily serve to benefit our state's tax coffers and the out-of-state operators who will realize larger profit margins.
A legislative analysis of the bill estimates it could bring in as much as $221 million in state revenues by the second full year of online gaming. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Indiana lawmakers are closer than ever to declassifying fentanyl test strips as paraphernalia. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Abigail Ruman reports a Senate committee passed a bill Tuesday that would make an exception to the statute to allow tools that test for the presence of certain substances.
Indiana law classifies tools that test the strength, effectiveness, or purity of a controlled substance as paraphernalia. Last session, a bill to remove that language from the code ultimately died in the Senate Courts Committee when it wasn't called for a hearing. This year, Senator Brett Clark introduced legislation that passed unanimously out of the same committee. He says this year's bill adds an exception for tools that test for the presence of a controlled substance rather than removing language from the code.
By leaving the language that's in there now that mentions testing for effectiveness, purity, or strength, that would cover that. So if a prosecutor can find a test strip that does that, then by all means charge him.
Clark says there is nothing outside of a lab environment that is capable of testing the purity of a substance, but he says it would be considered illegal if it were developed in the future. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
The full House also approved a bill with identical language on Tuesday. And for our final story today. How much is too much when it comes to drinking alcohol? A new federal analysis released this month raises concerns that even one drink a day increases your risk of cancer. That comes as part of a separate advisory by the U.S. Surgeon General, who said beverages should come with a label that warns consumers of that cancer risk. Side Effects Public Media's Natalie Krebs reports.
Lana Snyder sips on a quirk at Single Speed Brewery in Des Moines, Iowa.
It's a seltzer that they have here. It's one of my favorites that I have every twice a week.
She's the coach of a local running club. The group's semi-weekly runs always ends with this treat, a token for a free drink at the local brewery.
Like, we do enough running and we do enough other activities, and like one or two drinks doesn't seem to be a big factor health-wise.
U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy seems to disagree. Just days into the new year, Murthy issued new guidance that grabbed headlines. He called for an update on the warning labels on alcohol, directly addressing its link to cancer. The growing body of research supporting alcohol as a carcinogen is something that's not well known by the public. It's even taken experts like Michael Henry by surprise. He's the deputy director of the Holden Cancer Center at University of Iowa Healthcare.
For me personally, it was a revelation about the strength of the data. I had no idea how strong it was before I looked at it.
Henry says that the more you drink, the greater your risk is. That's because he says alcohol is converted into aldehyde when it enters the body. Research shows this chemical can damage the DNA in your cells.
It's very well established that cancer is a genetic disease that is driven by accumulation of mutations in disease, and often that occurs over a lifetime.
Cancer is just part of a long list of health issues linked to alcohol. The World Health Organization says it plays a role in more than 200 diseases, injuries, and health conditions, including liver and heart diseases and even mental health issues like depression.
There is this emerging consensus that there really aren't any health benefits of drinking alcohol.
That's Paul Gilbert. He's an associate professor at the University of Iowa College of Public Health. Gilbert says people may remember the widely cited studies that found drinking red wine in moderation improves heart health. He says experts now say these studies might be flawed.
They weren't done quite as well, quite as rigorously as we would do today. So it kind of casts some doubt on those findings.
But not everyone agrees. The National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine released a controversial evidence review last month that found moderate drinking could be linked to some cardiovascular health benefits. The review is expected to influence the updated U.S. dietary guidelines coming out this year. Current guidelines recommend no more than 2 drinks per day for men, 1 for women. But federal data show many Midwesterners already exceed that, and recent trends suggest drinking among some groups like women are increasing. This could affect breast cancer rates years down the road, Gilbert says.
This could be an effect that we don't fully see for 1, 2, 3 more decades from now, knowing that, cancers don't just pop up spontaneously.
But Gilbert says social patterns tend to shift slowly. He expects this to be the case for alcohol, as it was for smoking. And he says while it's possible drinking alcohol may have no health benefits, there are often social benefits surrounding its use. Back at Single Speed Brewery, Eric Schmidt says he enjoys hanging out with his running group. He says he often grabs a beer, but tonight he's drinking a non-alcoholic IPA. He says over the past year, he's cut back on alcohol. He says he feels better without it.
I enjoy sleeping a little bit better. I wear my watch to bed, and that monitors your sleep, and I actually do notice a difference.
Schmidt says he's not very concerned about long-term health risks tied to alcohol use, like cancer, but says he's just getting more motivated to be healthier as he grows older. Natalie Krebs, Side Effects Public Media.
And that's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.